Good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you might be. In this training video, which is aimed very much at beginners to Excel, we might call them learners, I'll be showing you in 3 different worksheets the 10 most popular functions in Excel. Once you master these functions, you can create spreadsheets which, to use a phrase, would be jaw-dropping. So let's see how we will approach this particular task in this video. First of all, you'll notice that in various cells I have the answers to the questions and the problems involved. In the first one, we'll be looking at how I got these sum figures here, the total figures. How did I get this figure here? By searching for whatever Sam's balance might have been, and whether or not he is overdrawn or whether he is in credit, and likewise for the others whose name I can type into here and see what the answer might be. In the second worksheet, we'll be looking at Vlookup, Iferror, CONCATENATE, and I'll also show you how to hide cells. Not delete the contents of the cells, but simply how to hide the contents of the cells. And finally, in the third worksheet, we'll be looking at 2 of the more powerful functions in Excel, COUNTIFS and SUMIFS, and I'll be explaining how I got the answers into those 2 cells there. So let's look first at the sum, count and average. Whenever I use the word function, it means a pre-written formula. So the sum function is a pre-written formula which allows me to add cells. Now, how did I get the total of the check account balances, bearing in mind that several are in credit and a couple are in debit? I clicked on a cell in which I wanted the answer, and then what I did was to, in the Home tab in the editing group, look for the Greek letter sigma, to the right of which is a small drop arrow. When I click that drop arrow, I'm shown the popular statistical functions. The one we'll be using is sum. So when I click sum, Excel looks up the column and says, are there 2 or more cells that I can add together? If the answer is yes, then it surrounds its guess, and I use the word guess advisedly because, as we'll see shortly, sometimes Excel guesses incorrectly at what you want to do. But in this case, it has guessed correctly and surrounded its guess with what is called a scrolling marquee. Some people call them marching ants. After you're happy with its guess, hold down the Control key and press Enter. When you use Control Enter, it keeps you in the same cell that you were using to put the formula in, and it says the total of those balances is $1,554. Now you'll notice that there is a little square blob in the bottom right hand corner of the active cell. There is always one active cell in Excel, and when I hover my mouse over it, the mouse cursor changes to a crosshair. If I hold down the left mouse button and drag through the cells to the right, Excel will copy the formula that I typed into C12 or entered into C12, and it will copy into those other cells by changing the cell references. So in this cell it said sum C4 to C11. The colon means all the cells in between those 2 cells. And when I dragged through that cell, it changed the C to a D, it changed the D to an E, etc., etc., until finally it changed to G4 to G11. So Excel took care of the formula copying automatically for me. Now the next question was, how many people own shares? Well, I can see here that there are 7 people that own shares. And the way that I got that answer was to enter a formula in there equals count, the count function counts the number of cells that have numbers in them. So I wanted to know how many people had numbers in the shares column. There were 7. I'm going to delete that particular function, and now I'm going to show you how I put that in there. I clicked the drop arrow and said count the numbers, count. Now it has guessed incorrectly because it looked up the column and said is there one or more cells that I can count? The answer is no, so therefore it looked to the left. So it either looks up or to the left, depending on what is above. Now I know that it has guessed incorrectly, so I need to override its guess, and the way I do that is to click in this cell. I can either drag down with my left mouse button held down, or I like to use the shift key and click on the last cell, which selects everything in between. Now control enter, the answer is 7. Now functions like sum and count are what we call dynamic. In other words, if I deleted one of the numbers, let's say Tom's shares are actually that he doesn't have any, I'll delete that number. We would hope that the number in cell H4 would change to 6. Let's press delete. And it does, it changes to 6, proving that the count function along with sum and average are dynamic. The next question, what is the average check account balance? Well, the answer is 222. So I'm wanting to know what the average balance here in the check accounts are in C4 to C10, and again I'll delete the function in cell H9, click the drop arrow, go to average. It's guessed incorrectly again because there was nothing in the cells above, therefore it looked to the left, but it's guessed incorrectly. So I'll say this is the column that I want to use. Click in the first cell, I'll hold down the shift key, or you could drag down through and click in the last cell involved, control enter, and it tells me that the average check account balance is 222. So again, just to prove that it is dynamic, let's say that Sue had a check account balance of 300. Control enter. The average has changed to $199.71. Control Z will undo that last entry, and the dynamic function shows me the correct answer again. In this worksheet we'll be moving along to what might be considered an intermediate to an advanced level feature of Excel. That is, we'll be looking at how we use Vlookup, how I use the if statement, and as we'll see shortly, also how I can use Iferror and CONCATENATE. Don't be too concerned about the word concatenate. It is a function which enables me to join text together. So let's have a look here. First of all, I want to be able to type a name into cell I3, this cell, and then I want Excel to look in the spreadsheet here, find the name Sam, and then depending on which column I want it to look in to give me the answer, I will use that column number in the formula. So let's see how Vlookup works first of all. So in this cell there is my formula, and I'm going to delete the formula so that I can show you how it works. So let's delete the formula first. Now I'm going to say equal Vlookup and open a bracket. The arguments that follow within the brackets are which cell has the question. The cell is I3 followed by a comma. the next argument needs to be the matrix that we want Vlookup to look in. So I'm going to click in that cell as the first cell and go down to the cell here, hold down my shift key and click in that last cell. So there it's added B4 to F10 as my cells that contain somewhere the answer. What I want to do is to look in a particular column, counting from the left in that group of cells which has the answer. Column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5. The answer, because I want to check the check account balance, is column 2. So I type the number 2 followed by a comma. I need a fourth argument because the information here that I'm looking at is not sorted in ascending order. Therefore I use the word false. The word false means, when I close the bracket, stop at the first exact matching cell. Now when I press Control Enter, it tells me that because I have Sam in here, it is looking at his balance in column 2. But if I change that to, let's say, Bill and Control Enter, it says that Bill's balance is 543, this balance here. So I know that it is working correctly. So that was Vlookup. But what would happen if I typed a name in here that didn't exist over here, or I typed one of the names incorrectly? What I'm going to do is to surround or nest the Vlookup function in a function called Iferror. So I say if error, and I open a bracket, which I need to do after every function that I type. And at the end of the formula I type a comma, and what I want to do now is to type in double quotes, because I want text, check name. In other words, if there is an error in the name, I will see that text. If error, check name. Let's count the opening brackets. 1, 2. Count the closing brackets. 1. So I obviously need a closing bracket there to balance the opening and the closing brackets. Now let's press Control Enter. No problem, because Bill exists. But let's say that I want to look up Mary. Mary. Control Enter. Excellent. But the next time I type Mary, I'm going to type a deliberate error. M-A-R-I. Control Enter. Check name. So I have a guide to what is wrong by simply using the if error function in conjunction with Vlookup. Now let's change it back to Mary, and it tells me her balance is 246, which is right. She is in credit. And I also see a little notification down here. How did I get this figure in here, 246? Well, what I did in that cell, I simply typed a formula equals I4, which is the cell that holds Mary's balance in this case. The equal sign creates a link between that cell and that cell. So it's really quite simple. If you want to show the contents of a cell elsewhere, just use the equal sign and refer to the, as it were, the main cell. Now the next name I'm going to type in is one of the people, we'll say Harry, who has a debit balance. He's overdrawn. So let's type Harry. And you'll notice, incidentally, just let me escape out of that. Click in that cell and type Harry and Control Enter. Now Harry is overdrawn. and it shows his minus balance down here. We'll be looking at the text shortly with the concatenate function, but I see the word overdrawn. How did I get that word overdrawn in there? In that cell I've typed an if statement, and I said if I4 is greater than 0, show the words in credit. But if I4 is not greater than 0, then show the word overdrawn. So that was all I did there. You'll notice that the if statement always needs 3 arguments, never more, never less. It does a test, it shows the result if the test is true, and it shows a result if the test is false. Incidentally, looking at I4 greater than 0, what if somebody had a 0 balance? Would they be showing as overdrawn? Well, let's test. Let's test Tom's balance. Let's make it 0. He's showing as overdrawn. Why? Because the test says if I4 is greater than 0, show in credit. But if it is 0 or less, which that test really means, it's not greater than 0, it's 0 or less, then show the words overdrawn. So Control Z will put Tom back where he was. Press Control Enter, and we'll say Tom's in credit 670. Down here we have a little bit of friendliness. This is Tom's balance. How did I get that text in there so that the word Tom changes every time that I type a name in the customer? Well, quite simply, I used a concatenate function, and that works like this. I said equal concatenate. Then I typed in what I wanted in double quotes. This is followed by a space, followed by the cell reference I3, so I see the word Tom. Then I typed double quotes followed by an apostrophe with an S. That was what gave me Tom's balance. And then I close the double quotes and I close the bracket. Now if I wanted to see how I could do that by using the concatenate function by inserting a function, I can click this button here, the insert function, and all I did was in text 1 I typed this is. I didn't need to use the double quotes, actually will put those in automatically for me. Text 2 was I3, which was the reference to the name, followed by an apostrophe S and the word balance. If I want to add to that, just to show how it works, I could make more text followed by a space, and we'll say well done, just to see how it works. Don't need the double quotes. And when I click OK, this is Tom's balance, well done. So I'll Control Z out of that to go back to where I was. Control Enter, and there we see Vlookup, Iferror, concatenate, and also I'm going to show you at this stage how to hide the contents of cells without actually deleting the contents. Let's say that for whatever reason Sue says, I want my check account balance to be confidential. I don't want anybody to see it. So what we do, we click in the cell and then we go to the number group and click the drop arrow, and what that will do will allow me to go to the custom area, and in the type I get rid of the code that's in there, and I simply type 3 semicolons together, and when I click OK, there I see that Sue's cell contents have been hidden. They haven't been deleted because I still see that they're included down here in the total. To show them again, what I need to do is go through the same procedure up here, but this time simply delete the remove the 3 semicolons, click OK, and you're back where you were. So there are 3 or 4 quite interesting functions which are used very often in Microsoft Excel. And the last thing I'm going to show you, and while we're talking about custom cells, is how do I get this particular cell to show in red, or this cell in red, when it is a minus figure. Let's use this one here, for example. What I did, I went to the number group again, custom, and I see here that in the coding there is an area down here which says show dollar signs for the numbers involved, that's the hashes, followed by a semicolon, because it says show in red if the number is minus. You've got to look fairly closely to see that minus, but that is why that figure and that figure appear in red. I was able to select both of the cells and do them both at the same time. Okay, we'll now move on to the next worksheet. 2 of the most powerful functions in Excel are COUNTIFs and SUMIFS. Let's look at them. The question is, how many people own shares worth over $15,000? So I can see here in this very small selection of people that there are 2, these 2 here, and the answer appears here. How did the answer appear here? Well, what I did, I arranged a function in that cell, COUNTIFs G4 to G10, G4 down to G10, where the value is over greater than 15,000. So I used the insert function box, dialog box here, so I'm going to delete this to show you how we do it. Insert function, and I generally use the insert function dialog box where I'm using more advanced formulas. So let's click and see what happens. Now there are a number of ways to search for a function. I can type the function name in there, or I can select a category, or it may well appear as it does here in the most recently used. But in this case I'm going to show you which category the COUNTIFs function appears. So when I click the drop arrow, it is in the statistical category. So I'll type the first few letters, COU, which takes me down quickly, and I want to find COUNTIFs. There it is there. And it says it counts the number of cells specified by a given set of conditions or criteria. Let's click OK. And here it is here. Now, this button here is called the range selector. When I click that, it actually shrinks this box, but this remains visible on the shrunken window, which when clicked again will bring back the window in full. So let's see how it works shortly. Now it says, what is the criteria range number 1? Well, let's shrink the box so I can see what I need to look for, and we need to look for the share column because we're wanting how many people own shares over a certain amount. So I'll click here, hold down my shift key and click there, and it puts that range of cells into the function arguments, and if I click the range selector again to bring it back, there they are there. So that's quite simply how they work. Many people don't understand those. They see them and are perhaps sometimes a little bit afraid to click them, but no problem at all. Now the criteria is greater than 15,000 in this case. So there's only one criteria I want to worry about. I could type in here perhaps one of the cities, New York, Dallas, whatever, but we only want to answer this question here at the moment. Let's click OK, and the answer is 2. Now, because these functions, as I mentioned previously, are dynamic, what if Tom had shares worth 18,000? Control Enter, the number should change to 3, which it does because it matches the criteria. We'll Control Z to undo that last action and Control Enter, no problem. So COUNTIFs is really quite simple to use. SUMIFS takes us another rung up the ladder in terms of the complexity of what we want to do. And in this case, the question is, what is the value of fixed deposits here held by New York customers with a net worth greater than 30,000? Now the answer at the moment is 31,000 because I can see here that 2 people will match those criteria. That person and that person. They're the only 2 people who live in New York who have a net worth greater than 30,000, a net worth greater than 30,000. Now, what is the formula? There is my formula there. It looks a bit long and involved, but it's really quite simple when we follow the logic behind it. So I'm going to delete the function and I'll use the insert function button, and this time we'll look in the category math and trig because that is where all of my sum functions reside. So math and trig, and we'll type sum to take me quickly down to an area to save scrolling and time, and I'll just scroll down a bit. SUMIFS, there we are, and up comes the SUMIFS, and here I see again the range selectors. Now the first thing I need to do is to look at what Excel says here to help me. The sum range are the actual cells to sum. So we're looking for the value of fixed deposits. So I'm going to click there, and the fixed deposits are in that cell down to that cell. That's the range. Let's bring it back, and the criteria range 1, I click in there and I'll shrink, will be New York customers. So I want to click there and then click down there with my shift key held down, or I could drag, of course. Let's bring it back and type NY. That is my criteria. The second range, they need to have a net worth greater than 30,000. So let's shrink, look in the net worth, click in that cell, shift key held down or drag down, bring it back, and the criteria is greater than 30,000. And when I click OK, there is my answer, 31,000. And again, we look at the New York people. Tom, he lives in New York, but he didn't have a net worth over 30,000. Did Mary? Yes, she did. She lives in New York with a net worth greater than 30,000. Therefore, her fixed deposit value is 6,000. And the only other person to look at criteria-wise was Harry. He lives in New York, and even though his check account balance is in debit, he has a net worth over $30,000. Therefore, it will add that 25 to that 6, and the answer will be 31,000. So there we go. Remember, practice is the name of the game. And this file is downloadable for free from the description below the video. Thank you so much for watching. There's quite a bit of learning involved in this upload. I know you can do it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.